Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Margot Norton. I'm the chief curator here at Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive. And it's such an honor to introduce our panel this afternoon with Melissa Cody and Tao Lewis, both amazing artists in the exhibition Making Their Mark, works from the Shah Garg Collection, moderated by Jenelle Porter. Our program is titled Crafting the Self and is in conjunction with the exhibition Making Their Mark, works from the Shah Garg Collection. Yes, I just mentioned this, which is on view in our main galleries through April 20th. So we have one more month for the show. It's been such an incredible opportunity to showcase the works from the Shah Garg Collection here in Berkeley, and together, with you all and with our audiences here. The exhibition assembles 78 works by 68 artists, by an intergenerational and international group of women artists who've created truly groundbreaking works. It's again just been such a great opportunity to showcase really like the innovations of these artists here in Berkeley, and to work together with curator Cecilia Alemani on the exhibition. Over the last few months, we've been able to draw so many important and sometimes some unexpected connections between the artists and the show. And among the threads that run throughout the exhibition, and I think one of the really unique strengths of this collection, is how so many of the artists draw from rich craft traditions. And it was important when thinking about the layout of this exhibition, Cecilia and myself kind of looking at the various sections of the exhibition to be able to showcase the innovations and craft techniques by the artists in the show throughout every room of the exhibition. So you'll notice that Tao's work and Melissa's work are in different parts of the show, and that was intentional. So what Melissa and Tao remind us through the respective approaches, and what I think we'll speak a little bit about today as well, is that these ideas of ourselves as individuals are inextricably linked to the many people, art forms, and beliefs that existed before us. These connections run throughout the exhibition. So you'll notice so many artists that have taught artists like directly, are artists who have also, gone to school with each other. Actually, Melissa just pointed out today that she was in school together with Diné Whitehawk and Rose B. Simpson, whose works are also included in the exhibition. And it's also important to realize this kind of interconnected web of influence and affinities throughout the artists in the show. They've taken up art making through a kind of lens which we can look through the past and the present and the future all at once, and that the self is as prismatic, layered, and strong as we shape it to be. I'm honored to say a few words about our distinguished guests this evening before they present on their work and then engage in conversation. Melissa Cody is a fourth-generation textile artist and member of the Navajo Nation. Her dynamic and vibrant weavings follow the Diné Navajo tradition in drawing on textiles Cody learned from her grandmother, mother, and aunt, all very respected weavers themselves. Cody melds Navajo weaving techniques with the Germantown style developed in the 19th century in Germantown, Pennsylvania, and also draws inspiration from digital graphics from early Nintendo video games and other cultural phenomena from the 1980s and 90s. She's a graduate of the Institute of American Indian Arts and has exhibited widely both in the United States and in Canada, with a recent just stunning exhibition titled Web Skies, which I had the honor of seeing recently at MASPI in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and in MoMA PS1 in New York last year. Tao Lewis is a Jamaican-Canadian artist based in New York. A self-taught artist, Lewis has crafted her education through communion with peers, like the queer Caribbean collective Raga NYC, and pilgrimages to meet the artists and institutions that inspire her, such as Atlanta-based artist Lonnie Holly and the G's Ben Quilting Collective. Once a student of journalism, she channels stories through material constructions. Using labor-intensive techniques like hand sewing, applique, carving, and assemblage, she transforms materials into large-scale figurative works. She recently exhibited at the 2022 Venice Biennale, curated by Cecilia Alemani, The Milk of Dreams, and in a beautiful solo show titled Spirit Level at the ICA in Boston. Works created for the show are actually now on view at David Zwirner in Los Angeles through March 29th. And finally, it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Jenelle Porter, who is a Los Angeles-based curator and writer who's organized numerous exhibitions on modern and contemporary art and craft. She's organized monographic exhibitions on artists including Barbara T. Smith, Kathy Butterly, Charlene Von Hale, Jeffrey Gibson, Mary Reed Kelly, and a gorgeous recent exhibition here at BAM PFA, Kei Sekamachi Geometries, who is a Berkeley-based artist whose work is also featured in Making Their Mark. She's co-editor of the book An Indigenous Present with artist Jeffrey Gibson, and forthcoming exhibition opening this October at the ICA Boston, and a recent monograph on Bay Area artist Viola Frey. So now, without further ado, allow me in welcoming Jenelle Porter, followed by Melissa Cody and Tao Lewis, and a conversation between them. And we will have room for some questions at the end, so please take note of any that arise and save them for the end of the conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Margot, and all of the museum staff that put together today's discussion, and to the Shah Garg Collection for sharing your work with audiences. So I'll just kind of frame out what we're going to do today for the next hour. I always love to know what's coming at me, which is that both Tao and Melissa are going to sort of walk you through what they make for about several minutes each with images. So we'll all get familiar with what they do, and then we will discuss things that we feel like discussing. And then, as Margot said, we'll take a few questions around the end of the hour. I thank you, Margot, for introducing the speakers. I actually had that on my docket for some reason, so you did the hard work for me. So I won't take any other time, but to say, I think we'll just start with Melissa. This is just purely in like the random order that the museum put together our slides. But Melissa, please go ahead. And yeah, I know you want me to. You want to click?
Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. Yat she Melissa Cody in it, yeah. Tkapahan Nishlan. Hushkanazo Bashachin, Tsinajini Dashe, Do Nakai Dene Dashanella, Long Week Dashagan. Hello, everyone. I am Melissa Cody. I am of the Edgewater People Clan, the Yucca Fruit Strung Out in a Line Clan, the Black Streak in the Wood People Clan, and also the Mexican People Clan. I wanted to introduce myself, with all of my clans, so that way, if anybody here is in the same clan group, we acknowledge our relatives in that way. I am from Northern Arizona, the Navajo Nation, the southwestern corner near Flagstaff. I have been weaving since I was 5 years old. I learned from my mother, Lola Cody, and my grandmother, Martha Gorman Schultz. I work predominantly in the style of Germantown, and you can see here in the piece that is currently on exhibit, it's called The Three Rivers. It is in the Germantown vein with the bright, vibrant colors. So even though it may seem really, really contemporary because of the eclectic colors, it's deeply rooted within Navajo tradition and textiles that came out of the 19th century from the Navajo area. So, like I said, I started weaving when I was 5 years old, and I learned in the traditional ways of the traditional Navajo techniques, tools, patterns, styles, and design work. And as I grew within my artistic practice, I kept utilizing those same traditional patternings, but reconfigured them into sampler work, which you'll see in a lot of the motifs in my textiles. They're almost collages of different traditional Navajo patterns and designs. You'll see a lot of bold imagery in terms of symbols, and a lot of my current work is geared towards reclaiming our traditional Navajo symbologies, but also maintaining our culture through language, and also, the reinvigoration of traditional arts. So let me see if I can go to the next one.
Oh yeah, these are.
Okay, there's the, so currently on the exhibition here is this piece called The Three Rivers, and it's about 9 feet tall. I did start weaving from the bottom to the top, and to give a little background information about my artistic practice, like I said, it pretty much follows the traditional ways of Navajo weaving. I still weave on a traditional Navajo vertical upright loom. There's nothing really mechanical about it. Each individual string is hand pulled and hand beaten with a comb that I hand manipulate. So there's no pedals, nothing that is, mechanical again about the actual loom. The weavings that I create, there's about 50 to 60 wefts per inch, so about 60 lines of color per inch. So if you can imagine, this is 127 inches times 50. That's about how many lines are woven within this textile. And a lot of my work, you'll see, it kind of breaks the boundaries of the woven canvas. You'll see a lot of the designs trail off, and that's intentional. I want the viewer to, be interactive with the weaving and kind of imagine in their own heads, what's existing beyond the woven rectangle. And so again, you'll see a lot of those same traditional symbols on the bottom left and right corner. You'll see the traditional Navajo whirling log. And so most will, make the direct connection of it possibly being, a swastika. But we as Navajo weavers were weaving it prior to World War III and the Third Reich. And there's been a huge influx of indigenous artists who, are reclaiming this traditional symbology and bringing it out of its taboo nature and bringing it into the more common light. And as you can see with the textiles, I try to incorporate foreground, middle ground, and background. So again, making the textiles more interactive in terms of captivating the viewer and bringing them into the piece. And this piece is also another a large format. I tend to work between the 7 and 10 foot range predominantly, and then I'll have another loom that has like a smaller woven textile on it, because with these pieces I can work, a regular 8 to 16 hour day and weave only 1 to 3 inches in a day.
8 to 16 hours, you just said.
Yeah, and so I still sit on the floor. The only difference between this textile and a small textile is the platform that I sit on. Instead of moving the weaving down, the weaving plane, I actually move up with it. So by the time I'm finished, I'm at the finishing top edge of the textile, I'm sitting probably about 7 feet up in the air. So that's a big difference than just staying seated on the floor. And traditionally, Navajo weavers, we don't draw out any of the designs. So everything is done in terms of design planning as I sit at the loom. So there's tons of geometry, a lot of multiplication and division that goes into planning out the textiles. But when I do sit down, I make sure that I know what dimensions I'm working in, because it's called a continuous warp. So the warp starts on one edge and is wound in a figure 8 all the way to from left to right. And so the size is predetermined. So in the beginning stages of setup, I'm already kind of formulating and brainstorming what is going to be on the loom. But again, the fluidity of the piece, I can have, something set in terms of design, but the design is always going to dictate what it's going to do. So there's a lot of change that happens as I'm weaving. And as you can see with the most recent work, I'm highlighting what I call the noble pixel. Again, it's referencing like the 80s, 90s, 8-bit video game culture, Super Nintendo, Atari, the first NES systems. But I wanted to kind of elevate their existence and put them in these wide open spaces where they're existing in a very bold light. And you can see a lot of my textiles will incorporate a lot of these serrated diamonds, and they give off a lot of vibration, and we call them eye dazzlers. And this one is referencing Spider Woman. As you can see in the title, Into the Depths She Repels. And the top is kind of referencing the Black Widow hourglass. And so that's a common motif that you'll see in my weavings is the Spider Woman. So within Navajo culture, Spider Woman is said to have brought the knowledge of weaving to the Navajo people, and then Spider Man brought the tools and the loom and all of the different elements made out of our natural world to create the loom. And as I've been weaving since I was 5 years old, the exhibitions that had taken place at the Museum of Art Sao Paulo and also PS1 MoMA included works from when I was weaving my first rug at 5 years old all the way till the current. So that's a good third, yeah, it's a long survey. It's not a retrospective, but it's a survey. So it spans over 36 years. And again, you can see the reference to the Spider Woman. I would be the main image of the hourglass, and then the two smaller ones are referencing my two children. So I have a 1.5-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter. So my daughter's almost at the age where I'll be passing on the weaving knowledge to her. And so she actually sits, she'll come to the studio with me and sit on my loom platform and act like she's weaving. So it's really, endearing to see her, kind of mimic a lot of the motions of the weaver. And it's nice to see that in her. This piece is part of a series that I did for my late fiance who passed away in 2015. And it was a larger series of about 7 textiles, which were all text-based. And actually, the text pieces I wove upside down. So it was just a different way of processing information and how to disseminate it from, one written state onto the woven textile, onto the loom. And then here is a shot of the PS1 MoMA exhibition. So you can see the pieces and see how large the scale is. And I did love the green walls. This piece is called deep brain stimulation. And as I've been going through my weaving career, I've been making bodies of work that were very much representative of what I was going through at the time. And this series came about in 2010 to about 2013. And they were all textiles that were based around my dad's Parkinson's disease. And so deep brain stimulation references an operation that one has in order to alleviate the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. And my dad actually did end up having that brain surgery. So this is referencing that. This is probably one of the introductory pieces that I had done in large format textiles. And I started from the bottom with the border and then wove to the very top. So again, this is, part of the Parkinson series. A lot of use of negative space, a lot of use of black for the stencils, and then also a lot of, you'll see what we call the Spider Woman crosses. And so the Spider Woman cross is, a highly coveted design because one, referencing Spider Woman and Spider Man, but also within the Navajo culture, 4 is a very sacred number. So 4 represents the 4 sacred mountains, which encompasses our traditional homelands, 4 sacred directions, and then also the number 4 is used in a lot of our ceremonial practice. So within the last, I would say 2 years, I've been actually really interested in jacquard weaving. So these are woven on a digital loom using jacquard. practices. And so I've been able to use the digital loom as a means to revisit a lot of previous works, but reconfigure, rework, and then also play around a lot with composition and creating textiles that I may not have been able to create on a traditional loom. So it has opened up, this really wide spectrum of new grounds to explore. So this is a jacquard piece woven on a digital jacquard loom with hand-applied fringe. And you can see it does have some of the design work from deep brain stimulation, some design work from some of the more recent pieces like the Three Rivers.
And we'll talk more about these different processes too later during our discussion about
Yes.
how different a way of working this is.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, and then this is also a jacquard piece. This one was most recently on exhibition at the Hammer Museum in Los Angeles. So this is kind of where I'm working right now is the digital jacquard loom pieces, but also large format hand-woven textiles.
Is that,
That's it.
stop there? Okay, thanks. Thank you, Melissa. Do you want me to do it, Tao?
Yes, I'm allergic to technology, even the most simple technology. I
Okay,
have an issue.
so Tao is going to share some of her work with us.
Thank you. Thank you,
Of course, you have to
Melissa.
kind of like, yeah, thanks, Melissa.
It's an honor to be here with both of you, and thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Just want to express gratitude for the fact that you're sharing this time with us today. I'm still always just shocked that people want to hear me talk. We'll try not to be too awkward. So my studio manager put together a selection of images. There's no real order to them. I'm just going to kind of talk broadly about what I do, and I guess what I know about why I do it. I'm Tao. I am an artist. I've been awkwardly calling myself an artist for a little bit over 10 years. Thank you, Margot, for the introduction. So I continually have reverted back to art making. And it's funny because I feel like I'm maybe at another arc in my story where I'm fantasizing about other creative journeys that I want to go on, but it's a good thing because I know it'll just lead me back to making art. I did try to pursue other things and was always kind of returning to this natural instinct to make things. I think at the heart of what I do is this just romance between myself and materials. The things that I make are sometimes, I think they exist in worlds outside of this world, and sometimes they're associated with ideas about Afrofuturism, but I think they're actually very firmly rooted in the past, and I'm very concerned with time and maybe even time as a medium and the effect that it has on the things that I work with. So I scan the ground, I look down a lot, and I think as soon as I figured out that I could, I started gathering objects and collecting different groups of things. And this has been going on since childhood, and now I have an absurdly large collection of different species of objects, if you will, in my studio that I regularly pull from to get inspiration to make sculptures and make shows. It sometimes starts with just a single piece of something. It could be a key. A lot of the time it's seashells. I love natural materials for the vibrations that they carry. But really there's no formula and there's no logic to the way that I pick things up. I figured out recently also maybe there's a bit of a synesthesia thing happening where I'm picking up all sorts of things that are maybe not visible on the surface of an object, but I think our nervous systems are really intelligent and incredible and do a lot to inform us about our environments. So I think about the objects that I'm working with as maybe pieces of a puzzle, And once I have a piece and I find another one, they start to sort of all speak at once and come together. And then before I know it, I've made a sculpture. I'm very interested in being a part of the transformation of materials. And I think this has a lot to do also with I think I have an issue with like endings and goodbyes. And this is a recent discovery, and it should have been obvious, but I think what I'm trying to do is give things a new life or see them continue or see them begin again. And not always with new meaning, but maybe with a new journey. And I'm sure it's not a normal thing to feel sentimental about like a piece of junk that I've just found on the street, but I really do. And it gives me the greatest joy to work with these things. And I think another big part of it maybe is just that I need to kind of create new narratives for the way that things and also people can exist in the world. And I spend a lot of time in an imaginary territory that is able to really kind of generate new possibilities for these materials. I started working with fabric in 2017, and that's a really important year because I made my first soft sculpture that year. And she was in the first slide, I think. She's sitting in a rocking chair. Her name's Little Gal. There she is. She lives in my studio.
Except when she's on show.
Except when she's on tour.
I did meet her in Boston.
Yeah, she's taking a break right now. She's taking a break from the public eye. But I began working with fabric because I was out of everything else. And I've always been interested in cloth and textile, and I think it's a very tender material to work with, and there's so much familiarity in it. And you can also find it anywhere. It's always accessible. And I started to figure out that, as I travel and I can't bring my studio with me, I can always go looking for fabric, and I can visit Goodwill and Salvation Army. And I also came to learn that the textiles are also kind of a reflection of the environment that you're in, and it changes from place to place, and I think that's really awesome. And I love that I could pack it into a suitcase, so essentially packing up my studio and then taking it somewhere else, and new things come along the journey. And I now just have bins and bins and bins of things that I move around with, and I have back pain because of it, but it's totally worth it.
You're too young for back pain.
Am I though? I don't know.
Maybe not.
I'm working on it. But yeah, this has been an ongoing love affair with fabric, and it's also just you can take it to such an extreme place in terms of thinking about how to change this material and how to transform it. And every time I think I'm ready to kind of explore something new, it has more to offer and more to give. And yeah, I got a little lost there, but I think I'm discovering something about transformation, transforming things, and figuring out alternative ways for these things to exist in the world. And yeah, I think that's it.
Thanks, Tao. Thanks. When I was working on the introductions today, I was like, okay, so Melissa was born in 83, and you were born in 93, and I was born in 1972. I was like, oh my God, we're all 10 years apart. But it does sort of say some interesting things about kind of, which might come up about, working and becoming an artist, and sort of parts of life that are, I'm going to go back to just some installation shots, parts of life that are represented in the work. I'll just start here. And I have some questions that should take between 8 and 16 hours to get through. No, we don't have that much time, but some questions that I'll sort of flow us through to touch on some things that I'm always curious about. Like when you're thinking about talking with artists, you're like, well, what do I want to know? Melissa, I've actually had the chance to be in her studio and seen this incredible loom that you work on and the way you work. And I'm just meeting you for the first time, but I have seen your work in person. So I'm wondering from both of you if there's a particular artwork you experienced as a young person that influenced your decision to pursue a life in art. Melissa, I'll start. Yeah,
I
start
think with me, the inspirations came from probably seeing my aunt, Mary Lou Schultz, weave. I think within our family, she was like the one to kind of step out of the box in terms of, these really traditional styles, but she started weaving and taking on commissions from tech companies. So she wove like an Intel microchip, and she's been weaving these really, heavily digital referenced textiles like computer boards and things that were referencing technology. And again, me growing up in a world that was so heavily based in technology and the growth and the kind of like it being born, it was really exciting to see something new and something be recognized outside of, the umbrella of Native American art. And it really gave me an inspiration that, hey, you don't have to stay in one, in one scope of art. You can reach out, and there's like a wider world out there. Because I did grow up on the reservation, but I also grew up near Oceanside here in California, and then also in Texas. So, I was able to kind of have my world broadened by all of those life experiences that my parents, afforded us, but also within my own relatives and seeing their work. So I think, my aunt was probably one of the biggest influences that I had growing up.
Yeah, you saw her sort of somebody working more as an artist as opposed to like somebody who's just working along very traditional lines of weaving.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. What about you, Tao?
Yeah, I think about it a lot. I think it's not a specific artwork, but I think it was the experience of actually growing up in and living in my mother's house, which was just total pandemonium when it came to her interior design. But fundamentally, it really affected me because she was so firm about creating this collection of things and really just asserting its value. She would find things, again, like in thrift stores, Goodwill, junk on the side of the road, broken tiles, garage sales, anything that caught her eye, and it was sort of like this absurd kind of like salon-style hang of different things that would be in every single room, but then they were also different colors, and she was always painting the walls, and she was making her own stencils, and there just had to be this constant like change and also this really electric feeling all through the house. And maybe it was a bit overwhelming, but I think that if there were anything that maybe planted this seed of my desire to want the things around me and to collect things and to make things, it was probably growing up in that environment, and also having the understanding that, these things were valuable because somebody decided that they were, and decided to give them a home and, some importance, and to love them also, yeah.
Yeah. When you were talking, I'm thinking, wait, your mom sort of sounds like a curator, but also an assemblage artist. But also, I think it sort of speaks to also the opportunities that our mothers and grandmothers were given or not given, too, that maybe your mom, I didn't know her, of course, but could have been perhaps a practicing artist, but there might have been reasons that wasn't available to her, whereas it's become available to you. So I know you both learned to work with threads at very young ages. I read, Tao, that you taught yourself to sew when you were 8. How might you describe the ways that thread and weaving or sewing has remained central to your art? So what I'm thinking about here is some of the legacies of sort of self-taught skills, but also matriarchal legacies of learning, so central to the ways that you both work?
Well, I think it's kind of like one of those inherent things in terms of Native American, specifically Navajo culture, because we're a matrilineal, matriarchal society. That's how we identify ourselves. When I gave my clans, those are actually all the female mother clans. So everybody identifies through the women's, bloodline pretty much and clan system wise. So it's always been something that I've acknowledged, and it's been inherently, my career has been revolving around it instead of vice versa. So I'm a fourth generation textile artist, and my mother has 13 siblings and my dad has 15 siblings. And with that,
And there's more weavers than just the 4 in your family, for example,
and so
I know.
if you factor in, my blood relatives and then all of your clan relatives, there's a huge, pool of phenomenal women, to draw inspiration from, to learn from, and to also actually, as I've gotten, older and been more established as an artist, there's a lot of reciprocity in terms of like the conversations we have and learning from one another. I think early on I was just like a sponge trying to absorb as much as I could growing up, but I've kind of grown into my own and have been able to actually almost be on the same level as a lot of the weavers that I admired, growing up. So, it's really inspirational to, again, have a lot of this power within the women of my family. And just recently, actually, in the last few weeks, my grandmother passed away. She was 93 years old and was weaving all the way until, well past 90. And
She was very well known weaver as
Yes.
well, very influential, yeah.
Yes, so, with her passing, again, it's another time for me to learn from that. And so I feel like, even though she's gone to the next world, I'm still learning and I'm still able to have these really strong connections and bonds with not only just the weavers in the family, but also, the women who I've drawn strength from them because, growing up on the reservation is hard, growing up without running water, electricity, plumbing, that's how I grew up on the reservation. And so I think just having strong women around me when I was growing up is, a big influence on the way that I do my own art practice.
But Tao, what led you to teach yourself to sew at age 8, as you said? If that is in fact correct what I read, because you can.
Yeah, no, it sounds about right. I remember very badly wanting to make dresses for my dolls and my various stuffies. And also, I had, this is so funny because it's another thing that I just very, very recently realized, but I had all of these bridal books of wedding gowns, which was something that you could find in thrift stores, plenty of them. And that would be, if it was a good day, that would be the thing that I got to have from the book section. And I just love looking at beautiful women in gowns. And I wanted to make dresses, pretty dresses, before I ever thought that I wanted to be an artist, before I even really had any idea about what I wanted to be. Everybody tried and failed to teach me how to use a sewing machine. I think I still have like the original singer that I inherited from either my grandma or my grandpa's girlfriend. I don't know. I was very frustrated by the machines, and I still am. I don't typically use them. I have industrial.
A lot of hand.
Yeah, I have Jukies and a serger, but I don't know. It's just something about me and the machines just like doesn't vibe. But I like the control and the intimacy and just the patience and quiet that I get from working by hand. I like that it takes time and it's slow. And I've always really liked that. And I've always just kind of understood, anything is possible. I can make something of any size. It just takes time. And like the longer I dedicate to doing it, you know, it will eventually come to be. But yeah, no, I've always enjoyed this process. And then something is finished and it's like I have like amnesia and I'm like, how did this happen? Like, how did that get here? That's so crazy.
Like thousands of stitches.
Yeah.
I too learned to sew from my mom, and I'd learned to make Barbie clothes. I would like you to know that feminists did play with Barbies, but that I totally gave it up because I was such a perfectionist. But I teased my mom that just gave me a great appreciation for really nicely made, expensive clothing.
Yeah.
But I didn't stick with it, as you both have, in terms of a sort of centrality of, you know, thread and for you textile and et cetera. So speaking more of sort of tradition and what we carry, what we hold on to, thinking about tradition in terms of how, or traditions in terms of how you define yourself and your work in relation to your own heritage and custom, and how, so that's kind of like one part of, and you can take any part of this or discuss this amongst both of you as well, to think also about how you navigate the demands of the mainstream art establishment with those of your communities, your chosen communities, the communities that you were born into, et cetera, because there's a lot of complexity that I recognize in what you both pull from your own lives and how you push that into intentionally the mainstream art world, which does not always get it, dare I say. It's sort of, yeah, there's a lot of questions. Let's take it down to how do you define your, maybe we'll get to those things, yourself and your work in relation to your heritage and to custom. Tao, why don't I start with you this time, if you want. You can also say pass.
I'm not gonna pass. No. I don't know. I'm very deferential to the people that have mentored me and who I've received whatever this informal education is from. And I feel as though I need to step more fully into, taking ownership over the things that I make and the fact that I've made them. But I really, truly see myself as a thing that it's just passing through. And I think, and I was just sort of chatting with someone earlier about this, but it's an awkward feeling because I do all of this work, and I think maybe sometimes people see the work, and of course it's a logical thing to maybe think things about somebody based off of what they make. I don't feel that big. I don't feel as big as the things that I do. In fact, it's really the only way that I've ever been able to kind of express myself and speak freely and confidently and directly, and it's all in there. It's it sounds so stupid and cliche, but I really think it's less so about me and more so in my just ability to kind of like be a route for the ideas to come out. And I think that that's a wonderful and miraculous thing that I get to be a part of, which also involves, a community of makers. I work with other women who are also working on these and sewing, and it takes a team.
In your studio,
A team that I'm very bonded to and protective of, and just feel very emotionally kind of connected to. But yeah, I mostly just feel kind of astonished and thankful to be here, and that these things also get to exist, and that I get to be in conversation with, the people who came before me and kind of inspired me and also held me up, and who also kind of validated that I can do this.
Yeah, thanks. I don't know, Melissa, do you have anything? Because I think some of these things you talked about, but about how you define yourself and your work in relation to heritage and custom?
Well, I think my work is kind of like the new tradition. A lot of the designs that, within Navajo weaving that you would consider traditional weren't traditional at one point. Germantown wasn't traditional. A lot of the traditional patternings that are regional based from specific areas on the reservation were influenced by trading posts, traders, the railway, catalogs of Persian rugs, and those are defined as tradition now. And I think that the work that I create allows a lot of whether they're a new weaver, a seasoned weaver, it's giving that okay, the go ahead to allow ourselves to be fluid people who are continuing to grow, and reminding us that we're not stagnant people as Indigenous people, because I think a lot of times we get pigeonholed as Indigenous people because we're not following what the textbook says we're supposed to be. And so I think the work that I create now is allowing, the doors to be opened, and allow ourselves to tell our own stories, tell our own histories, and then also, create work that's reflective of the current lifestyles that we each individually have, and have individual stories. And I think that's the great thing about the Germantown sampler. It's a wide color palette, and then also the idea of a sampler, you're still, drawing from traditional and cultural imagery that is significant to us, but it's allowing the weaver to make compositions that are, again, tailored to the individual story. And I think a lot of time that's lacking because, historically within museums, we were in the ethnographical section. We were next to the cavemen and the dinosaurs. So it's like we're stuck in that era. We were stuck in the era for so long where we weren't allowed to speak on our own behalves. And now we're kind of pushing that to the side and saying, no, we're still current people, we're still alive, we're still around, and, we're capable of speaking on our own behalves, and also, again, making sure that that we're informing the rest of the world that, tradition is always going to be this thing that evolves and grows and morphs.
Yeah. So I think that we know that society does this, but also we know this happens in kind of the mainstream art community, which is this kind of real need to categorize, and which pulls things so quickly into confined areas and hierarchies. For instance, with both of you using textiles a lot and making weaving, which is really sort of like, your works are so different, and I've been trying to sort of draw some of the things that are like together for a conversation today. But the kind of like way that the word craft is sort of used and misused a lot around probably both of your work. I know, Melissa, yours for sure, but it can be very hard if an audience doesn't have familiarity with, for example, more traditional forms of, and again, traditional is in giant air quotes, and I know this too just from my own personal study, of what you're doing that is experimental, that does put your work in conversation with more contemporary art histories and modern art histories, and where it doesn't. Right, so there's, we didn't really define a lot of terms for the audience today, just for time, but that, Germantown revival weaving was an absolute condition of forced enclosure of the Navajo people, that they were given blankets from Germantown, Pennsylvania, and took apart the blankets to get thread to make their own work. Mm-hmm. But those colors hadn't, those were sort of the first time that really bright dyed colors were introduced. But for example, if you go to the Indian market, the annual Indian market in Santa Fe, and I had the chance to do this a couple times recently. Like, I can go meet Melissa's mom, who's showing her work, and it's this kind of like really extraordinary sort of. Well, I mean, it's always extraordinary to meet somebody's parents, especially when you're just like doing your own thing in the art world, but that to see what she makes and to start to understand how your work is different from hers and how her work sits in different places in yours, but how there's, of course, correspondences. So maybe the last question before we take a couple audience questions that I would really like one or both of you to discuss is this idea of like transmission, about transmission is such an extraordinary word, I think, to think about in both of your works, because it is a word that conveys everything from communication to transformation to passing on traits. And Tawa, I see it in your work, and we talked a little bit about this already, you and I, and Viju, about what one does with materials and how one, transmutes them and what they do. At least there's like all kinds of words with trans, and of course, like it feels very in the air, this prefix to talk about what this kind of word does. But transmission, I think, is critical to your work and so critical to your work. So if you would just give a few sentences to that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I think, I get a lot of, I don't know, it's some kind of a therapy maybe from all these different component parts of building a sculpture. But yeah, I mean, a big part of what I do is simply just spending time with things, sometimes for years, and trying to really listen and feel and kind of build a connection with it so that I can understand it. And then it's almost like I'm relinquishing, I'm letting go. I recently, mounted an exhibition which was like the biggest purge of all of these tiny objects that I've ever done, and it was a very deep catharsis. But I get so much from this process, and I feel as though I always will kind of be able to maintain that connection because I've really bonded to these materials over time, and also because I feel like there is this kind of constant connection because of that time that we spend together in the studio, and then there's like this ongoing lineage where there's always a new work coming out of what was just made. And it's also part of why maybe I work iteratively, because I don't want to feel like things are done. And I don't truly believe that things are ever done. And again, I have an issue with goodbyes, which is why I give things really long titles sometimes, because I wanted to just keep going. And titling a work feels very final, so it's like a paragraph long title. But like in kind of revisiting and then maybe trying to kind of see something again, remake it, it's ultimately because I still need to feel a connection to that work, and because I have a longing for it. And when I revisit a work and try to see it again, it's really because it's like I'm missing a friend, and it's a good thing that these works get to go out and be in the world and have a journey and have lives. But I do feel like there is this constant sense of connection there. And if I see an artwork again, I do feel all the messages. I do hear everything kind of singing the way that it was originally. And I can identify the pieces of it and remember where I was when I found those materials, what I was going through in life, conversations that I had, who I was with, what was important to me during that time. Yeah, so, I think these things are real and powerful, and I am very woo-woo. I believe in the energy and the vibes and all of that stuff. And it's a huge part of, I think, why I'm working. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also in your work, Melissa, especially with the idea of transmission, like the works that you made about your father when he was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and especially compared to what you said, think about like artworks take a long time to make. Your work and your work, they just take months, and they're all these experiences in your life that are happening when you're making an artwork. And so there's like, oh, I was working on that when I was, in your case, Melissa, like pregnant with your son or something, and it's all there. We walked into the show earlier today, and you're like, oh, it's nice to see this piece again. That's the other thing that I think not everybody always maybe can recognize, that you spent all this time making something and then you let it go, and then you see it again, and then you're having all those experiences and then present experiences, right? But with you, Melissa, thinking about the idea of transmission, I mean, it seems so central to your work.
Yeah, definitely. I think like on a basic technical level, it's a transmission of, technical traditional culture. And then it's also, the verbal cultures that we have where, the symbology holds so much story behind it. And then, also transmission of, linking generations together, linking women together. Again, weaving was always seen as women's work. So again, transmission of, that strength and power that, this women's work holds, and it being able to be shown on the same and being spoken about on the same stage as, men's, art. And it's nice that, this mode of transmission is so heavy within the work that I do, that, I do think of myself as like, a steward of this information. And it's like my job to share it and make sure that, the longevity and life of, this information that's being transmitted is there for not only my generation, but for, my kids' generation and on. So, I really hold, that, that job, so to speak, as, on a very, very high pedestal, as I've been, weaving throughout the years. So that's kind of where I'm at with transmission.
Thank you both for all of those words. And now we would love to take some questions from the front row. I think we have a mic, so just hold for a mic, and we're gonna start. We're gonna start with the first hand up, which was just here. Yeah.
Hi.
And if you'd like to introduce yourself, there you can.
Hi everyone. I'm Komal Shah. I'm one of the two collectors behind this collection. And as you can tell, I'm a huge fan of both Tao Lewis and Melissa Cody, as well as Jenelle Porter, who wrote in our book. The question and sort of commentary I have is about children and sort of the younger generation. So when I saw Tao's 3 masks at the Venice Biennale in 22, and I went there 4 or 5 times to see the show, there were groups of children who were so enthralled and so amazed to be there. And so I was just showing photos to my husband of like all these groups of kids that would just navigate to the work. I saw that in our show in New York. I see that here as well. There's a certain magnetism that brings in kids. And the second part to my question for Melissa is, the question's coming. With all of the iconography that you have around, Nintendo and video games, I find many people in sort of the student world and the younger generation getting drawn to it and trying to decipher it. And so the real question for both of you is this intentional? Were you thinking about how do you draw the younger generation in, or has that sort of happened? Just curious if you think about them in your audience.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do. I think the interaction between my work and the audience is something that I always have in mind. And, one thing about my generation is, I was there for the first, gaming systems. I was there, to be one of the first people to use the internet. Imagine not having the internet. That's how, I grew up. And then also,
I like how you phrase it, like you were the first person to use the internet.
first.
No, wait, I was the first. Nope. I was the first person to use the internet.
But my generation saw like the introduction of all of these technological advances, and I think that's why it's so heavily influenced my work. And I do have, again, I think a younger generation is more drawn to the work, not only because of, the references to technology, but also the individual stories that are told. And I think prior to my generation of weaver, a lot of the weavings that were coming off Navajo looms were all of these, pseudo, traditional patternings. And there was a lot of the individualistic ideas and histories were removed from that because, again, we were more ethnographically categorized,
And the color is so different too.
Yeah, in museums, it says Navajo, and whatever regional pattern. And our individual names were never tied to the artwork. So now, as I've, graduated into the level of weaver that I am, and the current weavers, their names. There's actually a face that belongs to the artwork, where before we were just identified by tribe, and then that was it. Or Southwest, that was it. So again, it's taking the individual's identity and pairing it with the artwork. And so that's something that's really new with the current generation of, art exhibition that you'll see in terms of Native American artwork. We actually have names. Yeah.
Yay! I mean, to speak to children also, I mean, it's a long-time institutional curator too. The tactility and the color of both of your works are just so irresistible. And I think that we access so much through, obviously through touch and through our eyes. We were in the show earlier, and Margot mentioned to us that they had to add some barrier to your work because it was just a little too irresistible. I mean, I've actually seen people in museums kind of do this, like, like, don't touch it. But yeah, maybe to speak to Kamal's question about kids.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And there was one image back here of an installation in the UK at the Hepworth Wakefield Museum where there was an iconic destruction of the show that happened in just mere minutes with a school group that went in, and there were seashells missing. There were toenails broken off. There's it was total pandemonium, but I was like, you know what, you guys? This is their jam, though. I don't blame them. You know what? I applaud the child that, took a seashell and pocketed it. And it is irresistible.
No.
Well,
no.
I mean, it's a different story when it comes to institutions, but I really do try as much as possible, if it can happen in kind of a controlled and considerate way with adults around, I do think that they should be able to touch. And I think it's maybe even bordering on cruel that they can't, because the materials, they're very domestic, they're familiar, they're comforting. I made a whole show once out of just blankets and towels and these really soft, just, touchable things. And aside from that, there is sometimes maybe a bit of a cartoonish kind of nature to the features of some of the masks and things like that. But ultimately, I think, simply put, everybody has an inner child. I was a very quiet child. I kept my ideas to myself, and I think my inner child has just gotten louder and bigger and more ferocious, and I think that's really where all of this is coming from. And that's why it's so awesome to see kids really engaging with it in such an honest and investigative way, and they have such incredible things to say about the work.
Yeah. Just here, this lady, she'll bring you out. Oh, there's a mic coming behind you. And then I think I saw somebody raise their hand farther back, and we'll do your question next. Go ahead.
For Melissa, how do you define digital weaving? What is the technology?
Well, the digital jacquard weaving was actually something that, came across, my studio just very, very, I wasn't ready for it. And I think that I was really drawn to it because an actual, a woman actually formulated the coding for the jacquard. And so, that was, it sparked my interest right away. And then also, the digitalness in terms of the weaving on a digital loom, plus, my own digital work and the woven tapestries that I make, it just made sense. And, once I was really kind of like dove into it, it just kind of blew me away. And it was really exciting. I think that's the main thing that really grabbed me. It was exciting. It allowed me to create, these compositions that I would never in a million years be able to create on a traditional Navajo loom. But yeah, it was just exciting that, a woman created it. And again, it was made, computer coding and a lot of math, geometry, which is all the things that I was already doing in the first place.
It's so remarkably different from you sitting in your studio weaving for months to you creating an image, which is sent to, because you make them in Belgium. Yeah, that, a file is sent, and I know there's a lot of back and forth, et cetera, but they're basically being loomed. And jacquard is two-sided, and it's a very different. I've seen some of the work in person, and it's your work, but it's very different too. And I'm looking forward to seeing sort of how you move through that too. And you also think like some of this, how much, Melissa, for you, is that sort of expedient in the sense of like, there's only so much work that you can make. This is something I wanted us to get to, and maybe it's more of like slightly after, but that, you have people in the studio helping you, so it's kind of more hands for the handwork. When you weave in the studio, you're like,
Yeah,
it's you.
Yeah, it's solo. So,
yeah.
I mean, it can be very lonely. It is like a lonely space to be in. But again, I think the imagination fills that space. And it's funny, people say, do you dream your designs? And actually, like, yeah, I dream every night. And a lot of these things, sometimes I can't even decipher. I'm like, did I dream that or did that really happen?
Or is it like burned into your eyeballs from the day's work? Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, my work takes, especially the large pieces, take anywhere from 4 to 8 months to make. And so I spend so much time with the work. By the time I'm completed the piece, it really does feel like a completion of that relationship. And I'm ready for, that piece to live another life with another person. And with the jacquard pieces, I'm not spending, as much time in terms of like day in, day out, hours, minutes, days, months, weeks, but it's still fulfilling me in a very full way because it's almost like I'm learning how to weave on a traditional loom again. Yeah. It's just, all of these visions that I have that I initially sit down with at my weaving loom, they're there in like you said, a vectorized format, it's like there's a definite completion to a digitally loomed piece, and there's that same finality that I feel when I'm doing my hand woven pieces.
Team, I'm actually looking at my watch, and I know that we have to sort of and okay, is there one more question in the audience? Oh my gosh, there's so many questions. Okay, if you have the best question, I want you to ask it. I'm getting a lot of energy over here and over here. I'll take where the mic is right now, just to be expedient. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Tony, and I too am a Navajo artist. And Melissa, when I first saw your work, one of the things that really intrigued me was how much it had to do with technology and the way that like you'd start a weaving and it followed a lot of the sensibilities of traditional, their devices like a central medallion, or there would be a border, but then it would change, and it had so much to do with like if you're on a phone, the way you can zoom in on things, the way you can swipe to the left or to the right, the way that they organically were changing had so much to do with the way our current minds work and the influences of everything that's frenetic in the work. And with that, I always felt like It began, with the beginnings of traditionalism, the traditional weavings that you were doing. And then all of these influences were coming into your life, everything from video games to, the way that you can manipulate and maneuver shapes and forms. And then you could leave that and they could be cosmic. But the one thing that I really loved was that idea in your weavings where the patterns could actually zoom in, that they could actually come forward, they could move, that they, there's the A side of the weaving and there's the B side. So there's this element that you can change the orientation of it, and it's a different feeling or emotion. And I guess the question I have for you is that this chapter in Navajo weaving, which is one of the most creative periods in Navajo loom weaving, is so important that it feels like you and your contemporaries, your family and the other people around you, are finally regaining agency and the reclamation of what it is to be an artist, a weaver, a traditional, free-thinking person. And in your experience, when you're weaving these things and you have all of the history of Navajo weaving, do you recognize, this is a tougher one, your own wake and your own influence and the way that it's changing the world around you? There you go.
Recognize it. Yeah, I do, because I think a lot of like self introspective, like really critiquing myself, is something that I learned to do early on, is critiquing not only my technique, my color theory technique, just my loom setup, critiquing how I, again, view traditionalism, how I view ceremonial or spiritual aspects of the weaving, spiritual and ceremonial aspects of me physically sitting at the loom for that long and, kind of being in this, weaving trance, if you will. But I really did have to figure out, who am I today? That's going to be different than who I am tomorrow. It's going to be who, and as I go through the different, phases of my life, now I'm a parent of not only one child, but two. And it's like all of these shifts in my own life are all reflective in the work that I create, and also looking to the future for my children as well. So a lot of, these, inner conversations I've had, not only to myself, but about myself. I started it very early on. And so I think being able to do that, but also speak freely about it, and then also have these conversations with weavers who are coming up now, I think that's been probably one of the greatest assets I've learned as an artist.
Thank you. Okay. Back in the back. I think from the high side we can do one more, but this is really it, you guys. And then, by the way, if we didn't get to your question, you do have a question, we'll sort of stick around after, if you want to ask the artist something like outside of here. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, my question is, how have you noticed your art impact the lives of others? Thank you.
I think that's sort of what was just asked in a way. Maybe Melissa just already answered that, but Tao, why don't you take that, since it's a little more along the
That's
same
a
line.
big question. I really don't know. I think I can only have hopes for what that is. I don't have any real control or even specific ideas about what I want my art to do for people or how it should impact them. But I really maybe hope that it gives people space for reflection and introspection and maybe some sense of expansiveness. I think I can only be sure of what it's done for me. And it's done a lot for me. And I feel, again, grateful for the fact that, you know, it can share space with as many people as it does out in the world. And I think art is important. And even though it's like difficult to exist in the world sometimes, that never stops being a truth. And I just wish for everybody to have access and be able to spend time with artwork. I hope that's
that's
okay.
That is a beautiful and elegant place for us to end today. Thank you. And thank you all for coming. Agreed.